Hello everybody, my name is Niall O'Riordan. I'm a flute player and at the moment I'm training in the Feldenkrais Method. I'm making this video to show you some techniques that I've maybe taken inspiration from the Feldenkrais Method and applied directly into practicing the flute. At the moment it's Feldenkrais Awareness Week and there's been lots of activity going on, and I made a promise I'd make this video to maybe get people interested. So the things I'm going to show you really, they're inspired by the method rather than an actual Feldenkrais lesson. But I think it can be very interesting for flute players to see how we work, how we approach our learning, and maybe to get an idea of how it works, I suppose, in some ways, even though, as I said, it's not actually, this wouldn't be a Feldenkrais lesson. The Feldenkrais method is for everybody, not just musicians. I started experimenting with trying to get a better technique in the third register, and I started experimenting with some of the ideas we have in the method, and one of those ideas being differentiation, and that really is dividing aspects of whatever you're doing apart a little bit more. The method works really by attention, the way we pay attention to ourselves in any given kind of action. And from my experience teaching and playing, I think we can really learn a lot more efficiently if we start paying closer attention to how we're using ourselves. I find that a lot of people, including myself, we use an awful lot of extra effort that isn't needed for what we're really doing. So that might be kind of something that, you know, that we can develop a little bit more. So moving swiftly on, this is my second time making the video, so I rambled on too much in the first one, so I don't want to have it too long for you. Working with practicing the third register. Particularly why I picked this is actually because there's a lot of coordination between the hands, much more coordination needed than playing in the first two registers of flute. There's lots more distinction between different fingers, how they need to move, and the coordination patterns between them are, let's say, a little bit more demanding. So I decided, well, what would happen if we actually just practice one hand at a time? A very kind of simple strategy. But surprisingly, I haven't heard many people ever kind of speak about that. So if you let's take a C major pattern. I'm going to talk you through this as a lesson. You could probably explore the ideas as you go through the lesson with me, and then I would recommend go and do it yourself with a little bit more space, taking more time to really explore the ideas that I'm going to kind of present to you. So the first thing would be, with this pattern, would be really to separate out the movements that you need for the left hand. But just before that, it's always very good to observe what's present right now for happening. So I'd encourage you to actually maybe play that pattern, play that scale now, and just see where you're at. See how easy it feels, see the speed you can play it in an easy way, and generally how it feels too. So we have something to go back to after going through this process. And hopefully it'll improve a little bit. So then, just looking at your left hand, rest your flute in a way that you really don't have to. You could explore it held up like this a little bit. I found it was kind of easier and more enjoyable if I just have it down my side, so that's what I'm going to kind of do now. I'm going to maybe have it here so you can see it. So you just play, you finger the movements that you need for the left hand. So then that would be C, D, E, this is what we need for E, F, G, F, E, D, C. And then you would continue moving in that way between each note, really noticing if you're engaging any extra effort and how easy is it to make the changes in fingering between notes. What I've noticed in my practice and my exploration is that between certain notes I began to engage kind of some extra effort that wasn't really needed, maybe extra effort in my shoulder, my neck, or even sometimes I felt myself just kind of bracing myself a little bit in the abdomen. It's very subtle. It's very subtle. And what we're after here is for you to really notice what you're doing. And with what you're doing now, just making those movements C, D, E, F, G, you really want to be paying attention to, can you make it easier? Can you make it feel lighter, easier, freer? So that means you can go as slowly as you like. It means that you can move between certain notes if you notice that there's some kind of a change in your sensation, you're feeling yourself that actually you tense in some way, and then you want to go in between that, back and forth, and see, you know, is that completely necessary? If you're unsure if something is necessary, one good strategy is to do it more. So just explore, do you really need to tighten up your shoulder for that movement, or do you need to do a certain thing? And also by doing that, it's going to bring it more into your awareness, so you can become a little bit more aware of what you're doing. So that would be the first step, and what's very important in the Feldenkrais method is actually resting, believe it or not. Resting is a time that you take for your brain to start beginning to assimilate the learning that's taking place. And by going slowly with attention, you give yourself a chance to really learn something. I see a lot of people playing like really quickly over and over again, but they're not really learning anything because they're just repeating an old pattern over and over again. If you slow something down, slowing it down with attention is going to actually begin to give results. So you just continue going through all of that, and then you rest. You rest and give yourself time to really you know, have that learning really kind of begin to process. And then you do the exact same thing with the right hand. So then you start moving. So the right hand is interesting actually, because sometimes it's not engaged and then it becomes engaged. And what's interesting about that is also that brings in timing and coordination. So even if you're not using your left hand, it means that you still need to engage in the coordination. So for instance, when you're moving C to D and then you bring in E, there's a certain timing needed involved to bring in that. So I would encourage you to actually think through the first two notes as well. So you'll be like thinking C, D, E, C, D, E, and then maybe continue C, D, E, F. Not so right there, I made a mistake, but C, D, E, F, G, F, E, D, C. C, D, E, C, D, E, F, G, F, E, D, C. And calling out the numbers, you can see I was making mistakes there, so it's not as easy as you think. And it for me, it kind of is created a kind of curiosity in me. Well, how come I can't do this? So you'd explore that a little bit as well. So to kind of recap so far, left hand, then right hand, resting in between, noticing yourself, noticing the effort that's needed, just generally paying attention to yourself. Then you can go back to the left hand, and again begin to make the movements in the left hand, but this time I want you to notice your breathing. So actually, just before you make the movements, notice your breathing. When we engage in extra effort, our breathing normally can give us signs of that. Normally, if we're engaging in extra effort, we have a way of holding our breath. I often find with flute players, when I'm teaching, that there's almost a way that when we're trying too hard or we're trying too much, there's a muscular effort that really is quite related to holding our breath. Even though we're blowing, there's part of the system that's almost holding the breath, maybe between the ribs, abdomen, diaphragm, whatever. There's a kind of an action that the system isn't allowed really to exhale in the way it's wanted. It's engaged in holding breath even though there's air going out. If you can understand that, it's really a description of what I'm thinking about, what's really happening. So then you go back to moving in between these notes, but noticing your breathing. At the moment we're not blowing, so you pay attention to your breath as you inhale and exhale, and you see if you can make the movements with your fingers in a way that doesn't disrupt your natural flow of breath. So that's a good way of paying attention to yourself. There's a divided attention between paying attention to your breathing and paying attention to what you're doing with your fingers. So you go through that process and be curious to when you have slips in concentration or things don't work out. Be curious about that, because that's where you can learn something. Sometimes we practice and we want to be perfect, but actually we forget that when we're practicing, we're really trying to explore to improve something and get something better, rather than there's no point if you just practice and everything is great. It means there's nothing there for you to learn, or you're in denial, one or the other. So then you can do that. You can also engage practicing in the imagination. That would mean imagining movements between notes: C to D, D to E, E to F, F to G. And notice when you do it in your imagination if your state, I'll say, changes, moving between note to note. Is there any effort that you engage between certain notes? I've noticed that there can be. I noticed that, and sometimes these can be efforts that maybe have extra kind of parasitic effort that we learned when we were learning the flute at the start, when coordinating between D and E was difficult. So we kind of need to give our brain to learn something in a deeper way and in a more efficient way. So we're revisiting all that. That's quite straightforward. You rest after that, and then you go and explore the exact same thing in your imagination with the right hand, and you do that. Then you can maybe explore doing it all in the imagination with both hands together. And then in your imagination, I've just got sidetracked. I can remember a quote by Sir James Galway saying, "If you can imagine it, you can do it." There's a lot of scientific evidence really that's becoming to back up these ideas. Working in the imagination really does change the brain. Especially imagining movement actually does create the neural patterns that's needed for the movement, and actually your brain has a very, very similar response. So practicing in the imagination can be incredibly effective, and something that we don't benefit from, and I think we can benefit much more from that. So you practice, you go through the scale in your imagination, but noticing yourself. You might want to go through it in your imagination, and can you go through playing those notes in your imagination without your breath being interrupted? Because at the moment we're not blowing, you know, we're not blowing at the moment, so it's just really focusing on the movement of the fingers. And then you could explore playing it quicker in your imagination, and what points in your imagination just seem unclear, or it feels as if you slipped, your focus of attention hasn't really worked, and you slow that down and you really become aware of what's happening in those moments, and see can you kind of gently move through them in an easy way. And then after all of that, you go back and just maybe play the scale once or twice, not being attached to the results. Sometimes it'll be better the next day when your brain has actually processed it a little bit deeper. So you could maybe explore, if you're going to put the scale together, I could propose two ideas. One would not be to actually play the scale at the end and leave it until the following day. The other thing would be to maybe explore it in a non-ambitious way and just see what happens. There's a few other steps that you can use to develop this, and I think I'm going to include them in a separate video because it's worth speaking a little bit more about that. And then you also explore that's just one part of the scale. I pick one scale every day, and then you go through a lot of maybe a different scale every day, different combinations. So maybe all the major scales. I started on C. Maybe a good place could even be starting on maybe an A major scale or something, or I don't know, A flat major, where you're kind of getting into that place of the coordination of hands together, and think of it as really kind of the time that you spent. It might take I think it's a 20-minute process. With the talking in this video, it's getting close to that, but it's a much deeper learning. It stays with you in a much more solid way when you take things apart and then put them back together. If you're having particular difficulties between the certain movement of fingers within the hand, you could maybe explore that separately. Maybe the coordination from a D to an E. We have two different things going on here, really. We have, this finger here, the fourth movement finger going up. See how lightly you could make that feel, and this going down. So you might explore that a bit, and then do coordination. So you can really play around with the ideas. To recap, make it feel as light and easy as possible. Notice your whole self, your whole body. As you're doing this process, you might notice that you're clenching your foot. That it's all that kind of stuff that we really want to bring into our awareness. So going slowly with attention, lots of regular rests, being kind of patient with yourself. The process is more important than the destination here. So when you're doing it, it's not about getting to play fast. It's about really noticing what's happening for you. So I really hope you enjoy it, and I really hope it works. It certainly has worked for me, and I look forward to seeing you on one of my other videos. Thank you. Bye.